Okay, let's start. Welcome to the Institute for Holocaust, Genocide and Memory Studies at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst in this new coronavirus fashion. I'm Alon Confino, the director of the Institute. Thank you for joining us today for this event commemorating Holocaust Remembrance Day, Yom HaShoah. It is perhaps opportune that we are assembled here now in different countries, in different time zones, to commemorate the Holocaust, which in itself has become a global remembrance in the last generation. Before we begin, let me say that in the next few weeks and into the summer, the Institute is going to hold weekly talks by several people about various subjects: Holocaust, genocide, human rights, Jewish, Israeli, and Palestinian history, as well as issues concerning our current state of life, about the corona, about plagues, and such things. So please join us. There will be more information on the website, and we will also send more information by email. If you want to join our email list, please write Paz. We are honored and delighted to have with us today Dr. Lilach Naishtat-Bornstein, who shall deliver the Holocaust Remembrance Day talk. Dr. Naishtat-Bornstein is a scholar, an artist, an activist, and an educator. She teaches in the Kibbutzim College of Education in Israel. She was this year at Harvard University, a fellow at the Department of Comparative Literature, before the coronavirus upended her plans and she went back to Israel to stay with her family. Among her books are The Song of Songs and the Poetic of Romantic Fragment, and Their Jew, Right and Wrong in Holocaust Testimonies. Lilach joins us now from Israel. It's a bit later in the evening for her than for us. We are thankful for this. After the talk, we shall have a short Q&A. The best way to do it is if you send me a Zoom chat with your question, your name, your affiliation, and I will read it to the group. Another possibility is to raise your hand via Zoom, and we will let you speak. So, without further ado, Lilach and her talk, Kibbutz Buchenwald, History as Fictional Fabric. Lilach, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Alon, for your kind introduction, and thank you, Paz, for hosting us. This week, can you see the presentation? Do you see it? Yeah, okay. So this week marks the 75th year of Buchenwald liberation and of the foundation of Kibbutz Buchenwald, which is a lesser known story. When I first heard this name, I was struck by this incredible combination between Zionist and Nazi terms, Kibbutz Buchenwald. I hear some kind of echo.
I think, I'm sorry, continue. A couple, there is some sound in the background.
Okay, great. So I was talking about this strange combination between Zionist and Nazi terms. And in the last 5 years, I've been studying it together with 2 Israeli artists. Today, I will tell you the story of Kibbutz Buchenwald, present a recent art exhibition, and share with you some thoughts about the role of art and fiction in the understanding of history. So, let's start. Okay. Kibbutz Buchenwald was a group of Jewish Holocaust survivors who were united with the aim of building a kibbutz in Palestine immediately after their liberation. This group was formed during a 10-year period in training farms in Germany and in Palestine until they eventually settled down and changed their name to Kibbutz Netzer Sireni. This film documents Buchenwald right after liberation, and this moment is important to understand the essence of the group, because after liberation, survivors faced a whole new set of challenges. These traumatized people forgot what it meant to be free, as one of the group members put it. Moral and sexual lawlessness, theft, violence, marketing, and acts of revenge against the Germans spread in the camp. And this is what motivated three of the older survivors to assemble a group of youngsters and move them as quickly as possible to a nearby farm. You may know kibbutz as a Zionistic socialistic unique form of settlement, but kibbutz achshara is a term used for training farms in the diaspora as well as in Israel, which serve to prepare pioneers for life in a kibbutz. Kibbutz Buchenwald was the first post-war kibbutz achshara, which was followed by many others. So you see these 16 members, they came from Eastern and Western Europe, and this group consisted of both religious and secular people, and even ranged in age. I mean, the older member in this group was a 45-year-old, and the youngest a 13-year-old girl. It is because of these differences, they faced tremendous challenges in living together. And despite the differences, the group maintained its unity by invoking a poetic equation. They wrote, "As we were about to die together, so we have decided to live together in freedom." The name itself was a central platform in the formation of the group and came about through dialectical tension. They wrote, "We all wanted to establish a kibbutz in Israel that would retain the name Buchenwald, but at the same time, each of them wanted to start new life in Israel that would no longer remind them of Buchenwald. Nevertheless, they kept the name Buchenwald and put it on their flag, as you can see. This flag, together with other documents and objects from the group's life, is carefully preserved in the Netzer Sireni archive. These lines that we just read were written in the Kibbutz Buchenwald collective journal, which contains several hundred pages written mostly in Yiddish, but also in Polish, German, French, and Hebrew. In this journal, the group members documented their daily life, and they used to have each Saturday night, they used to have a public reading of their weekly writings. This is indeed an incredible document that was not fully published yet, and my hope is to bring it to publication. Another man who was fascinated by this group and by this journal was the American Jewish journalist Meyer Levin. Levin was one of the first Americans to enter Buchenwald, and he was very much impressed by this group, and he translated excerpts from this journal, translated it to English and published it in a series of newspaper articles, and later on it appeared as a book entitled Kibbutz Buchenwald as soon as 1946. In the introduction, Levin wrote, "These are excerpts from the group diary of Kibbutz Buchenwald, selected by members of the commune. Here, in their own terms, there are answers to such questions as, What sort of people survived the concentration camps? Are they fit material for life in Palestine? Is there any optimism left in them? How do they feel in relation to their past? Will they be a burden to Palestine? Have they anything to teach us? I believe they have. Léon also documented the Kibbutz Buchenwald in a film. The Illegals, published in 1947, mixes history and fiction. It tells a fictional story about two Holocaust survivors on their way to Palestine. The actors in the film were actually Holocaust survivors themselves, and some of the filming was even done in their childhood villages. I mean, the whole film was shot against the background of occupied Europe under very unconventional conditions. Let's watch a short segment from the film.
Wenn das Volk und unser Volk, wir rennen doch.
After the end of the days of the Nazis, there remained a number of Jews who had not yet died in the camps where they had been forced to labor as slaves. They wandered over Europe, each hoping to find someone of his family also alive. They were known as displaced persons, and in a camp of displaced persons, Mika Wilner found a bride named Sarah. He made his way with her to his native village in Poland.
There is the village church. This is our street. I was brought up here. These were all Jewish houses. My three uncles lived on this street. They were tanners. It was a town of Jewish leather workers. There was a little school here, where I learned the alphabet and the Torah.
The camps, and the names of those in the groups who passed through in a day are not long remembered.
As you can see, this is the gate of Kibbutz Buchenwald displaced person camp in Geringshoff, Germany. And another twist in the web of history and fiction is provided by the story of a young Jewish woman who watched this film in Canada in the late 40s. Inspired by the group, she immigrated to Israel and eventually married one of the Kibbutz Buchenwald members. So the group in Geringshoff was now 67 members, and soon another branch was set in a nearby village, Gersfeld. Kibbutz Buchenwald became famous, and the group drew in many new members from other camps. It became a site of pilgrimage, and the Jewish Agency for Palestine even asked the members to postpone their immigration to Palestine in order to leave them in Germany as a symbol of political activity. However, 80 of the kibbutz members set out for Palestine with certificates in hand, and the first group, Buchenwald A, reached Haifa's port on Jewish New Year's Eve, followed by the second group, Buchenwald B, who arrived to Palestine 6 months later. On the eve of Sukkot, after the 10 days quarantine at the athlete detention camp, they reached Kibbutz Afikim in the Jordan Valley. They stayed in Afikim for another 2 years and trained themselves for kibbutz life. It is fascinating the fact that even living on a kibbutz in Israel did not constitute a total fulfillment of their vision, because they kept their name and they were being called the Buchenwalders, and they defined themselves as a state within a state, Buchenwald in Afikim. In June 1948, the group members were sent to protect Spon farm. This farm was founded by a German Templar, Ludwig Schneller. Schneller established a home for Christian orphans victims of a massacre in Lebanon, and later on, local Palestinian children were housed there. It served as a agriculture school for Palestinian children. And when World War II started, the British authorities, the British authorities deported the German Templars from the Palestine to Australia, and when Iraqi forces occupied this farm, they were driven away by the Haganah, by the Jewish soldiers, and the Kibbutz Buchenwald member among them. And here it is. It was decided that this would be the permanent home of Kibbutz Buchenwald, in some kind of poetic justice, as a newspaper title suggests, a kibbutz that was established in the death camps in Germany has settled on a former Nazi farm in Israel. On April 1949, the group adopted the name Netzer, which means a branch, based on a verse from Isaiah. This botanical metaphor expressed the idea of rejuvenation, and the logo of the kibbutz is a fallen tree from which a blossoming branch sprouts. In practice, however, although they adopted the name Netzer, they were still called Netzer Buchenwald even in official documents. In 1952, members of another kibbutz, Kibbutz Givat-Brenner, joined the Kibbutz Buchenwald, and they expressed their wish to commemorate their comrade Enzo Sireni. Sireni was an Italian Zionist leader and a celebrated intellectual who immigrated to Palestine in the 20s. As part of the Jewish parachute unit which he established, he volunteered to help the Jews in occupied Europe. He parachuted into Italy, was captured immediately by the Nazis and executed in Dachau. Sireni is known in Israel as a national hero, part of a prominent family. You might know his grandson, Professor Alon Confino, who is our host today. Members of Kibbutz Buchenwald asked to change their name to Netzer Sireni, but the Knesset committee rejected their request because Sireni is a non-Hebrew name. Only after long debates, an exceptional law was passed and the committee approved the name, and this is what they wrote. In consideration of the view and the wish of the Knesset, which regarded the affair of Chaim Enzo Sireni as exceptional in the light of manifestation of sanctification of God's name, the committee approved the renaming of Kibbutz Netzer Buchenwald as Netzer Sireni. And I take this point where the name Kibbutz Buchenwald was changed as a closure to this chapter of the story. There are more fascinating chapters in the Kibbutz Buchenwald story. For example, the ways the kibbutz members kept their legacy. Did you know that they were the first Holocaust survivors who held a memorial ceremony in Israel, Holocaust memorial ceremony in Israel? Other chapters tells the narratives weaved, the very different narratives weaved by Germans and by Israelis in order to understand this phenomenon of Kibbutz Buchenwald. Now, today, most of the group's founding members have died, but Kibbutz Netzer is alive and kicking, and the Kibbutz Buchenwald's documents, as I said, are carefully preserved at its archive. However, the question must be asked: what is left today from Kibbutz Buchenwald? Until recently, the treatment of Kibbutz Buchenwald's story has centered on two approaches: documentation and research. The main ambassador of this story in historical scholarship is Professor Judy Baumel-Schwartz, who published excellent books and articles in the 90s on this topic. Her point of departure is very personal. She is the daughter of Yechezkel Tidor, the father of Kibbutz Buchenwald. Just the same, and perhaps for this reason, she follows a very formal approach with an emphasis on historical trends and factors. Unlike her, in my investigation of the story, I stress imagination and fantasy that were weaved into history. We saw such examples in Levin's treatment of the story. I want to mention two other examples. Let's go back for a minute to Buchenwald before liberation. This is Motel Striegler. He was a Yiddish poet and journalist and was one of members of Kibbutz Buchenwald. He was active in the education of Buchenwald children in Block 23, part of the cultural underground in Buchenwald. His works were performed in public by the camp children before prisoners and at times before camp officials. In the satire, Buchenwald Anxieties, Striegler imagined the day of liberation. Let's read the opening of this piece. Lately, you hear it's happy in town. What's happened? In short, the war is ending. Well, I go and ask someone, so what if the war is ending? But he just wants to bite me. Idiot. If the war ends, we'll be free. And while everyone is celebrating, my head is full of worries and fear of Liberation Day, which could, God forbid, arrive. And what I'm saying that is that through this is through humor, through imagination, Striegler was able to imagine and even predict these difficulties we were talking about earlier. Let's take another examples of the use of fantasy in history in the group journal. When I sat in the Netzer Sireni archive and read this journal, I noticed several fictional and metaphorical pieces marked with signs of stars under the pseudonym Zeus and Mars. One of them is the humoresque falling stars. Let's read it. We would like to inform you, dear female and male comrades, of the establishment of a state within a state. In our kibbutz, a new institution has been founded, the Circle of Fallen Stars. So far, we have acted like crazy gang with no plan, but now it has happened. 11 friends suddenly noticed on Saturday after dinner the naked truth. Why become a human and try to emulate those who never participated in the demonic dance we went through? To bind naively to men, place, land. What a joke. In the ghetto and in the camps, we formulated a new concept of life. All is vanity, little people. Silly and pointless is your seriousness about our actions on this earth. We are suspended in the air. We are living planets lit by cold fire. We are stars, falling stars. And just to remind you, this was written about 3 months after liberation. I was able to identify the authors of this piece because in the next paragraph they count the members of this circle of fallen star with mythological names such as Venus and Jupiter, and so the names Zeus and Mars are related to Meir and Avraham Ahuvia. Together with Shmuel Ahuvia, these 3 brothers were central members in the group and dominant contributors in the writing of the journal. So these artistic representations of history inspired us to take a further step. And here we are. I'm here with the artists Or-Ner and Dov Or-Ner and Gil Yefman. Gil Yefman is with us today, and later on you can share your impressions with him and address questions. So 5 years ago, the 3 of us joined together. We thought about the name Kibbutz Buchenwald as a live, explosive, unresolved burden, an impossible hybrid of Weimar, Nazi, colonialist, socialist, and Zionist ethos. And we thought that in an age of collapsed ideologies and with the death of the last Holocaust victims and Nazi murderers, we asked, how is Kibbutz Buchenwald to be understood today? Dov Or-Ner said, there are many stories about Buchenwald. We don't want to do historical research, we want to bring the stories to life. Or-Ner is a 94-year-old active radical artist. He was born in Paris under the name Bernard Erner. His parents were perished in Auschwitz while he and his brother were hidden in a ministry. After the war, he immigrated to Israel, settled down in Kibbutz Hatzor, and Hebraized his name to Dov Or-Ner. He reinvented himself once again in his 80s as Bad Renro, which is his Hebrew name spelled backwards. Renro bounds the artist's father, together with Hitler, reshuffles criminal and victim, truth and fiction. This persona took over Or-Ner's work in the last 2 decades and allowed him to cast Hitler and himself as heroes of a surrealist drama. Gil Yefman is a transdisciplinary artist. He transforms myths into fantastic worlds populated by ambiguous alternative heroes. He uses archival materials as point of departure for collective knitting projects with various communities. I mean, he's using a multi-medium. One of them is knitting, but many others as well. Yefman, inspired by Dov Or-Ner, Yefman invented Penelope, a character wearing terrorist mask, and on her head is a knitted crown in the shape of a giant golden tooth. And this bizarre couple, Bad Renro and Penelope, they stars in their collaborative work. Yefman's solo art exhibition, Kibbutz Buchenwald, was one of the fruits of our collaboration. And let's hear Yefman introducing his exhibition.
שמי גיל יפמן, אני אמן מושגי רב-תחומי. אני מרבה לעסוק בנושאים כמו גוף, פוליטיקה של זהויות, מגדר ומיניות, ולשלב את זה עם טראומה קולקטיבית. אני משתף פעולה עם דוב אור-נר, רדיקל חופשי, פורץ גבולות, הוא ניצול שואה גם, חלוצי האמנות המושגית בארץ, וגם עם קולקטיב קוצ'ינטה, שזה קולקטיב של נשים אפריקאיות מבקשות מקלט, שסורגות למחייתן. התערוכה נקראת קיבוץ בוכנוולד, וזו בעצם תערוכת יחיד משותפת עם דוב ועם קוצ'ינטה. התערוכה נולדה מתוך מפגש עם איש ששמו אורי שניידר, שהוא עיתונאי של הטלוויזיה הגרמנית. בא אליי לסטודיו ושאל, אתה מכיר את קיבוץ בוכנוולד? והתחלתי לצלול לתוך הפרשייה ההיסטורית המרתקת הזו. חטפתי איתי את דוב, שחטף איתו גם את לילך ניישטט-בורנשטיין, שהיא בעצם ליוותה אותנו מחקרית. לא משנה לאן פנינו, נתקענו בחומרי נפץ הכי מקסימים ומעוררי התפעלות והשראה. דוב הוא השראה עמוקה עבורי וגם מנטור, ובקונטקסט הקיבוצי הזה החלטנו לייצר מעגל סריגה קולקטיבי, שחברות קוצ'ינטה מנהלות. אלינו חברו בהתנדבות 265 משתתפות ומשתתפים. זה היה תענוג וכבוד גדול לייצר כאלה חיבורים ולבנות בעצם את הגדר לא רק מצמר אלא גם מסיפורי חיים שעדיין קושרים אותנו יחד. עבורי מדיום הסריגה נדמה לכתיבה. העט הוא כמו המסריגה וחוט הצמר הוא בעצם חוט מחשבה. דרך שרשרת של עיניים שהן כמו נקודות מבט משתנות, בעצם הנרטיב נכתב מחדש. אני לא דובר טיגרינית ואמהרית וערבית. שפת הסריגה עבורי ועבור קוצ'ינטה היא אמצעי הישרדות, איזושהי קרקע משותפת. והתערוכה כולה בעצם נסובה מסביב לפערים שבין היסטוריה וזיכרון. הדמיון הוא איזשהו מרכיב פעיל שמאחד את כל העובדות לכדי רקמה חיה ורוכשת. היות והחומרים הם מאוד רכים, אז די הגיוני לעסוק בתכנים קשים. זה מייצר גם מגע בלתי אמצעי בטראומה וגם איזון.
This is a very rich exhibition, and I want to focus on one element. In the middle of the gallery, there's a huge oak tree brought from a forest in the Galilee, and it stands there as a gesture to Goethe's Oak in Buchenwald. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, you must know, was Germany's most famous author, and 10 of his most fruitful years he spent in Weimar, near Buchenwald. And when Buchenwald Concentration Camp was built, many trees were cut down. However, one huge oak tree was saved. And this was because, according to legends, under this tree, Goethe composed his famous poem, Wanderer Night Song, as well as parts of Faust. Here is a photo taken by the prisoner Georges Angeli. You can see the tree between the kitchen and the laundry, and actually the laundry facility of the camp was built with a special niche around it to adjust the tree. And this is, you can see here the tree in a drawing by the prisoner Léon Delarbre, which referred to it as Goethe's tree. Both prisoners and guards recognized it as Goethe's oak, but their interpretation, but their interpretation of the tree were very different. The Nazis saw it as a symbol of great Germany, and they thought about themselves as servants of this greatness. And the prisoners, on the other hand, saw it as symbol of humanism and regarded this tree as witness to their miseries. A German myth bound the destiny of Germany with the destiny of this tree. When one falls, the other one will follow. And indeed, this tree was burnt when the American army bombed Buchenwald in August 1944. The only thing left from this tree is the stump, which was carefully reserved by the Nazis. You can see a plaster replica of this stump in the Buchenwald Concentration Camp site. Batya Lishansky was an Israeli artist born in Ukraine and immigrated to Palestine in the beginning of the 20th century. Her memorials are scattered throughout whole Israel. This monument, Holocaust and Rebirth, stands in the middle of Kibbutz Netzer Sireni, expressing the start of national rebirth. And the visitors in Yefman's exhibition are invited to sit on this tree and watch a video in which Badr and Ro and Penelope, this strange couple, are touring the imaginary site, Kibbutz Buchenwald. And in the climax scene of the video, the two fly from Buchenwald over a Spon farm. They land on Lishansky's monument in Kibbutz Netzer Sireni and then reborn from the Goethe oak stump and plant a seed there. Let's watch this. I want to conclude with a recent work by Dov Or-Ner, my friend Corona. Here, Or-Ner adopts COVID-19 as a friend. Instead of keeping a distance, he brings it closer. And I think this is similar in a way to what the members of Kibbutz Buchenwald did when they took Buchenwald to be their name. My claim is that imaginary and symbolic dimensions are essential for understanding reality, and this is especially true when it comes to surreal scenarios as we experience these days. We are facing now, I think, a crucial moment in history that none of us understand fully. Or-Ner says, grass grows on the soil of Buchenwald. Life comes back, and so does history. The grass that grows in Buchenwald now, maybe it has a memory. And perhaps fiction can serve as a key in decoding reality, and art as a vehicle to move backwards and forwards in time. The friction among the mythical, the human, and the natural in Yefman's work encourage us, I believe, to discover the utility of fiction as an instrument for coping with history as we approach a world in which responsibility exists. Thank you for your attention. Now I would like to open this up to questions.
I guess you clap too, no?
Thank you so much, Lilach, for this wonderful presentation. Do we have any questions? Baz, you will tell me if you see something.
Sure. I now realize that I didn't think the participants had the power to mute and unmute themselves, but it turns out that they just might, as Luis just showed. So if you can't figure out how to do the chat or something, you can unmute yourself, raise your hand, or something.
On your bottom left.
So I can start with a question, Lilach. So how come you started to be interested in Kibbutz Buchenwald?
Okay, so first I must confess that I'm not a historian, okay? I was trained as a literary scholar, and in my work I am fascinated by narratives, traumatic narratives, which draw many interpretations that are very different from each other. And so is romantic fragment. These are literary texts, but also historical stories. And I met Dov Or-Ner 6 years ago. We collaborated on artistic educational project. And he just, like Gil said in this video, I was carried away with this to this adventure.
Gil, I was struck by your imagination. It was so hilarious on the one hand and heartbreaking on the other hand. So can you tell us something about the exhibition, how it was received, and what was your experience?
Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you so much first for your question and for hosting this forum. Thank you, Lilach. It's always so intriguing, and there's so much more and into this marginal episode, which is so central to the history and identity of Israel as post-Holocaust state. And basically the imagination, I mean, I always believe reality is beyond any imagination, and many of the evidence from the Holocaust could definitely prove that. A lot of inspiration came from, of course, Dov, and just by this reporter that I mentioned in the video that just saw in my studio the previous collaboration with Dov that had to do with another kibbutz, Kibbutz Mordechai, another kibbutz full of Holocaust and revival and stories. And then it was like, you must know Kibbutz Buchenwald. And I was like, just shocked, to be honest. And that actually led into like a roller coaster. And Lilach was definitely a protagonist in the sense of research. Also, her text is so elaborative in the catalog. And it's much more than just dry history. It's like, so I think imagination is everywhere. Basically, you can stick to facts, but like one could try and stick to the facts, but I think Nativa Ben Yehuda stressed it very boldly when she said Zionism, like Holocaust, are alike, in which politicians would try to say it happened like this or like that. But the truth is that every Holocaust and the Zionism decomposes to 10,000s and more evidence that construct that story. So it felt very natural first to approach to Kuchinate, to the collective of African asylum seekers that I share my studio surrounding, my life. I live in the south of Tel Aviv, so, and I know them. I've been collaborating for years before. And the shuffling of hierarchies, viewing the status quo story of Zionism, of the Tzabal, as marginal, and taking this esoteric episode of Zionism, which is Kibbutz Buchenwald, and put it in the central, as a pivotal point to examine our nowadays narratives. And I think in these days of coronavirus, again, they are the weakest link in Israel, and they need a lot of help. And I think there are, sorry if I talk too much. I don't want to take over because I can like continue alone, because
I think we have two questions.
Right.
Can I put my hand in the, I don't want to skip the queue, but may I put, when it's my turn, may I put up my hand visually? Because I still don't know how to use that function.
We don't have a queue, so we should, I don't know who would like to go first with the question. Rita, if you would like to, since you're here.
Yes.
But I didn't mean to interrupt, Gail. I don't know if you were.
Well, I can answer, finish my answer with another question, maybe for later, if we have enough time. Well, of course, the paradox is like the most kind of natural and makes sense reality. And so the poetic justice that Lilach mentioned in Kibbutz Buchenwald, in Netzel Sereni, in the German Templars housing, basically it was an orphanage that was established by Schneller, and then the poetic justice is missing from the point of view of these orphanage, the Syrian and Lebanese. And then we also addressed the Kibbutz Buchenwald people with this question, and they also told us that every now and then a guest speaking Arabic, he grew up there, comes to visit. This is another very interesting point, which I admit I didn't address fully. And for me, I just keep on asking myself this hard question that maybe it's for the Kibbutz Buchenwald number 2 exhibition and research, but I think it's a very crucial question.
Actually, what I was going to say is somewhat related to this. I'm the daughter of a Holocaust survivor, and my mother was quite heroic and hidden during the war, was a friend of the Frank family, and ended up at Bergen-Belsen helping them to recover when she was still a very young girl, and rescuing survivors with the help of the people coming from Palestine to get it settled with some of the survivors. And she spent a long time preparing a group of orphans, Hungarian orphans, who had survived, who amazingly had survived. And they went to a kibbutz called Ben Shemesh, and I later learned, I think in Avi Schleim's book, that in fact they were enlisted almost immediately to fight the Palestinians who lived on that site. So in a way, this is rather similar to what's happened with Kibbutz Buchenwald, that there are these layers of assimilation and now we would say colonization, but the problematic between two oppressed people fighting over the same land. I don't know what those young people thought. They were teenagers at the time. And it reminds me, if I may just add another thing that I think is related. I've written a memoir about my mother, and I gave a talk at Harvard Hillel some years ago, 2017, I think, where I talked about the analogies to now. And at that time, Trump had just imposed his Muslim ban on the US. And I said, you know, I was lucky enough to come from Switzerland, a country, but we were stateless when we arrived in the US. But suppose I'd been from Sudan or Somalia or Syria, you know, I wouldn't have gotten into the country and so on. And they said, it's not the same, you know, it's not the same. The Holocaust is not the same as what happened to the Syrians who are being bombed now by Assad. And I said, I don't think it makes much difference if you're the one being bombed. You don't say, is this worse than the Holocaust? Is it better than the Holocaust? You know, we have a problem thinking about the nature of suffering. And that's what was so interesting about this talk, is that Lilach took us in this totally, and you, of course, also, Gil, took us in this totally unexpected direction. Here we were having an account of the Holocaust survival, and suddenly it became this surreal and beautiful work of art with all this naughty stuff in it. And I just thought, only in Israel, I don't think American Jews could do this, possibly. So that's my many comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Are there any other?
Could I say something?
Yes, Ken.
Sure, go ahead.
And then at some point, I'd like to say something too.
No, you go ahead, Luis, you can go ahead. I have two questions in the queue, but if you're already right here, you're welcome to ask the question.
Just a minute.
I am ready.
Let's go, Ken. Ken, go.
My turn?
Yeah.
Where is he? Oh.
Thank you for a really nice presentation. I've been living with some of these people, studying the rescue of children in Buchenwald. So I know some of these people before Kibbutz Buchenwald was formed. They were very active in the underground that rescued the children. They were not simply Holocaust victims. They had real agency. And they continued to have agency in creating Kibbutz Buchenwald and so forth. But my sense is that there's more discordance and disagreement among some of these people as to what their vision is or was about Kibbutz Buchenwald. And that history is a little bit beyond my reach. So I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Wow.
People fighting over what it should be and so forth. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Wow, I can talk about it all night. Well, what can I say? First of all, not all the group members were Zionists, you know? Even this essential fact, the question where to build this kibbutz was in dispute. So, and also I was talking about the father of Kibbutz Buchenwald, Yechezkel Tido, and I mean, this guy, he was 45 when Buchenwald was, I mean, in the liberation of Buchenwald, and he actually had 2 kids, and he didn't see his children for 2 years. They were in the United States, in Europe, and later in the States, because he felt that the group of Kibbutz Buchenwald was he had responsibility to these survivors. And later on, I mean, after a while, he united with his children and he left Israel. So, I mean, there are so many conflicts there, for example, between Eastern and Western European Jews. I don't know how much you're familiar with this concept of Ostjuden, but I mean, the Jews from Poland and around, they felt that the German Jews, the Yekes, are treating them as inferior. And of course, the tension between religious and secular members in this group. This was one of the main tensions. And actually, the institute, I mean, there were so many tensions, and in a way it was heroic. The fact that they kept their unity for a very long time, and they, eventually succeed in the fulfillment of their vision is really an heroic, because there were so many problems in the way.
So we have several questions. So let me name the people who want to ask a question. Short questions would be preferred. So we have Luis Marentes, Jim Engel, Jim Wald, Jonathan Skolnick, and then I have a written question by Aviva Ben-Ur. So Luis Marentes, please go.
Well, I'll try to make it short, but this is a spectacular talk. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And I am suffering that thing that I have to learn more about, those Buchenwald anxieties. Because my slogan for the last 3 weeks has been, we're gardening in the pandemic. And there is so much, and I do not know if my neighbor is here, but I say, in that Institute of Holocaust, Genocide, and Memory Studies, we have learned that in Auschwitz, the archive was kept. And we survived. And we're alive, and we're speaking about it. And on the other hand, and I'll speak a little bit longer, because I had a miraculous conversation with Léon yesterday, that we're facing some of the lessons of the Holocaust we are facing today with the coronavirus, both in the horror and in the creativity of people to survive. And I'll say just one more statement. Amongst our audience is someone who did not need the check that we are receiving right now, but it would have been nice to get it, and she lost it because, as an American citizen, she married someone who had a TIN number, a TIN, that there is a law that was not mistaken that specifies that if you dare to marry a person with that number, you must be willing to give up your rights. And I wonder if people concentrated with the coronavirus right now are echoes of what's going on. But those communities in Chelsea, Massachusetts, are so resilient that they will survive. And some of them have paradises, have Kibbutzim in El Salvador, to which they can return. And if the situation was peaceful, we would lose so many important people here. How can the Kibbutzim be an example for the people who want to go back to their homelands? With pride. So many questions. But thank you, Léon, for inviting me. Thank you for this insight. I made a statement, maybe. I'm sorry.
Maybe it was a statement, Lilach. Or do you want, or Gil, or do you want to say something? So maybe we'll have the next question by Jim Engel.
It's so good to see you. I'm sorry your time at Harvard was cut short. It was so good. You did so much. I had two questions. I will make them short because the way you already answered the first one, I was going to ask about the solidarity and the cohesiveness of the Buchenwald kibbutz. And you said there was a lot of tension. So I wanted to know if anyone actually dropped out, if people left, or if the group stayed together as a complete whole. And then my second question, is completely different. It had to do with the tooth on the top of Penelope's head. What does that mean? I can understand symbolism in art, I think, but I would like an explanation. Thank you.
Okay, so I will start and then I will pass it to Gil about the tooth. So,
yes, of course, thank you.
So thank you, Professor Jim Engel from Harvard University, for joining us. This group was very dynamic. I mean, even the fact that they began with 16 people and eventually, I mean, at several points, they reached more than 200 people. So it was very dynamic. And yes, it is true. There were people that dropped from this group, but I think that they kept, the core, they had its ethos, and even people that were not part of Netzer Sireni still kept their friendship and connection through the years. It is really a very inspiring story. Now I want to hear Gil's answer about the tooth.
Yes, I can also say a small thing about the kibbutz that actually nobody knew about it, or still nobody, I mean, although the exhibition was on for 8 months.
It was a big success.
Yeah, it was supposed to start as a 3-month exhibition, then it was prolonged to 6 and eventually to 8 months. And I think many thousands of people came to visit and got to know Kibbutz Buchenwald, which it's still like a mystery, and not a lot of people know about it. And then the exhibition, we had Lilach also participated in several artist talks and events that we hosted, and members of the kibbutz, along with the 2nd generation and 3rd generation, also came together and knew each other anew, and made like as if in a diasporal, familial, like mythical events. So I was very moved throughout the exhibition and far beyond. And just the golden tooth, of course, has to do with, well, first the body. It's like a bone, and it's a bone with a certain place, like each tooth has their own number and place in the mouth. But when you just take one tooth, it's like, just like a nomad, just, and the gold has to do with economy and death and its economies, and the way that, of course, the golden teeth were taken out from bodies of prisoners and accumulated into fortune. And still there's a huge debate, economical debate in post-war discourses. And it's just funny because it's like a crown, it's like a corona, it's a golden corona of this figure, which is like both Badran Rose biographies and Penelope are infused within reality and fiction. And actually, I would love to, before I forget, I will put a link to the full film in the chat room, along with the password, that you're more than welcome to watch the movie in your own time and get a deeper sense, maybe. I think it's good. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Jim Wald. Jim?
Thanks, Léon. Hi, yes. I'd started to write the question, but I'll try to say it more briefly. And basically, Lilach, your work is very engaged with history in all sorts of ways. And yet you say, correctly, of course, that you're a cultural critic rather than a historian. And you noted that some of the historians had done, in a way, the groundwork. They told what you called the formal story. They
Right.
uncovered the narrative and the facts and so forth. So I wondered if you could say a little more about your relationship to history. One way to think about it might be, do you need the work of the historians? Does that allow you more freedom to go off in new directions? Could you imagine yourself doing this work without them? How might it be different? Thanks.
Jim, my friend, it's so good to see you.
Likewise.
If not face to face, in a virtual way. Yeah, of course, I mean, I cherish, I mean, I appreciate so much, I mean, the work that, for example, Professor Judy Baumel-Schwartz did is the foundation of, I mean, enabled me to go to other layers. But I think I went back to read Edgar Allan Poe, is right, the poetic principle, right? And he's talking about another kind of logic that is it's not only I mean, I'm looking for, in my talk, I talked several times about poetic equation and poetic justice, etc. And this kind of connection or logic is very different than chronological or logical relationship between effect and cause. And he's saying that he's talking about the beauty. I mean, when you create art, you know this feeling when something, it doesn't have to be symmetrical or harmonical or even not beautiful, but it just needs to fit. There is some kind of, so I'm looking for this kind of, assemblance or analogies that I think gives us other perspectives. But yes, of course, I am for the historians, and I need your work as historian, of course.
Jonathan Skolnick.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you so much, Lilach Naishtat-Bornstein, for the presentation. I had the chance to see the exhibit last summer, and Gil Yefman would come out and talk with the visitors. And so my question is, I guess, a little related to Jim Wald, and it's kind of about an impression. I wondered if you could talk about the materials in the exhibit. You know, so many like knitted things and the you know, very surrealist film, because going through the exhibit, I had the impression that you couldn't really distinguish what were sort of artifacts from back then, like the flag, and the new things created for the exhibit. So I wondered, you know, what were your thoughts on the materials, and did you think about using, you know, interviews with the, you know, young people from Kibbutz Buchenwald that were recorded at different times to, you know, why things that seemed that like it was very not realistic and of another time and place versus like the voices and the pictures of the real people?
So it's basically a question for me or no?
Yeah.
Just what your thoughts were.
Go ahead.
So regarding the textuality of the exhibition and tactility and of the exhibition, which comes along very much together. As people intertwine with each other to create a narrative, so does text and materialistic elements, and that make you wonder, or your mind to seek and look for new values within these silent words, maybe. And so I wanted, although the subject matter is not always nice, the materials always bind people to them. And, you know, as if a sweater that we wear or a doll that we play with when we're kids. And so it's inevitable for us to connect with these materials and furthermore with these subject matters. And well, it also kind of creates somewhat uncanny relation to it. People that came to knit with us within the workshop, they weren't fully aware of the context of the exhibition. They just knew they were going to help cucinate, or yeah, to help themselves basically, to knit a hedgerow. They didn't know about the motive behind the hedgerow, and that it connects to Georges Perec, a reference from Auschwitz, where he brings a document that the commander of Auschwitz instructs his troops to create a hedgerow in order to cover the way to the crematoriums. They slowly, gradually discovered that along the way. And that created a kind of a chain reaction, a needed chain reaction that actually bonded everyone together. And so we were very much, also for Alon's question regarding the reactions for the exhibition. So we were very careful, and we had to kind of walk things through in order to realize the capacity of the audience. And also I couldn't, you know, where could I go with the art and what kind of material it, like would a series of organic soaps would match or not, you know, it's like this kind of, or a Nazi symbol, yes, no. So eventually I was very lucky to be open enough and to take the, no, I wouldn't say censorship, but definitely strong guidance of the museum. And so basically the reactions were not easy, they were complex, but they were always, yeah, but they were always positive, I think. I mean, even when there weren't. And of course, a lot of the materials, for instance, the oak tree has to do also with Beuys and Rudolf Steiner that studied Goethe. And so it has to do also with science, romanticism, nature, and human nature. And within the knitting, there are patterns, which are patterns of behaviorism, of thought, of structures like hierarchies, and like Foucault would, you know, use for language, or the felt has more like rhythm in it, so it's more of a transsexual material that has its own rules. And basically it's also an anthroposophical method of working with felting. And again, we've picked as a referral point the condolence letter. It's like a document from 1944, condolence letter that was sent by the propaganda ministry to grieving wives and mothers of troops. So women basically who lost their beloved in the war. And I won't say much further because you have to see it, but of course
it's a very rich exhibition.
Sorry.
One last question from Aviva Ben-Ur.
I have it right here. Do you have a tool on, or?
Yes, I have it.
Oh, go ahead, read it. Sorry, I thought I was the only one.
Yeah. Aviva Ben-Ur teaches at the Jewish and Near Eastern Studies Department here at UMass. And I guess it's more directed to Gil. Are any of the present day impersonators of Hitler featured in your presentation aware that the Hitler costume was very common among Holocaust survivors in DP camps in the 1940s during Purim? Or did you come to this idea of impersonation for your own reasons? And if yes, what were they? Can you compare your motivation and those of the Jews who dressed up as Hitler on Purim in the DP camp? I think that it calls for a dissertation, but maybe we will give you a few minutes to try to to answer
Thank
it.
you. It's a very beautiful question, I think. Also in Hebrew, tachposet v'chipus, like to wear a costume and to search for, is the same word, basically. It comes from the same root. And as Lilach mentioned, the Hitler costume, Hitler-like figure is not my invention. It's Dov Or-Ner's invention of it's incorporation of both his father that was murdered in Auschwitz and the Führer. And it's also funny to think about it on today's event, that today is the Israeli commemoration Holocaust Day, and it's also the Führer birthday today. So it's like poison and medicine are always endowed with each other. Like it's the same substance in different quantity. And I think Badren Roh and Dov Or-Ner are both the medicine and the poison. Maybe it gives us a sense of more responsibility that, you know, the perpetrator could become a victim and vice versa in given circumstances and times, which is not an easy idea, but it's definitely true.
I'd like to thank Lilach and Gil for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Alon and Paz.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you all, and be safe.
Please look out for more events like this. We're planning on doing more. And if you have any questions about anything, please email me. You can find my email on the website.
Is there the link to the film that was coming on chat?
I'm just putting it. And thank you, Alon. If I understand correctly, you're the grandson of Anto Sereni.
I am.
Oh my God. Mind blowing. Thank you so much.
I am, and we'll make a point to meet with Lilach, all of the three of us in Israel, whenever life will get to normal.
Surely it will. Actually, I was speaking with Dov earlier this morning, and he couldn't be part of this forum, unfortunately, because technology issues of technology, not his. But basically, he also feels very much like going back to these days when he was confined in that monastery as a kid. Very much so. So he's with us. He's like definitely within every fiber of our souls.
Sounds good.
If anybody is not able to access the link that Gil is gonna put here, I'm gonna, if it's okay with him, I'm gonna try to get it and put it up on our on this event page for this event, so that people can access it there. In case the Zoom chat is not there when you go back later. So Jonathan, if you're not able to access it or something, I will get it to you.
I think you can chat with each of us individually, but we can't see Gil's chat.
I just changed it so that you guys can all chat with each other. So Gil, if you want to send it into the chat, you're welcome to. But
I lost the window somehow.
I'm gonna get your contact information and get the links from you.
Gil, you can also send it to Paz, and he's going to put it on our website, and then each participant can go there.
Yes, I'll get your contact from Lilach, and I'll get those links.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Have a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.